Why do I do these things to myself? Why am I here? Why do I love causing myself pain? Here I am staring down the barrel of the gun, getting ready to watch the Smurfs movie from 2011. I make no secret about the fact that I rather hate the Smurfs. I really don't know what it is about them. I just hate them. They're so weird, annoying, odd. Look like blue boogers. I don't know how this hatred started, but it is part of me now. I just have to accept it. I'd honestly forgotten these films existed, to tell you the truth, until that trailer for the upcoming Smurfs movie dropped a while back, and it all came rushing in. Which is why I figured I'd watch the OG film from the Smurfs revival and see if it's actually as bad as I'm expecting, or if it's better than I hoped. Before I did that, I wanted to check the analytics on this movie to see how it did. I was honestly shocked at how well it did at the box office. It had a budget of $110 million and ended up grossing $563 million, which is baffling to me. What a high number overall! I did a little bit of digging, and this movie well and truly blew up outside of the US and Canada. Don't get me wrong, they still did well for themselves, but it seems the Smurfs are really popular outside of that market, close to tripled the US-Canada gross, which is kind of unusual. It's usually larger, but not that much larger. No wonder they made a sequel. Despite its commercial success, in the end, the fact that it did well at the box office 14 years ago means nothing to me as I'm sitting down to watch it on Netflix today. I wanted to have some sort of idea what I was walking into. Of course, this means we have to fire up the old Rotten Tomatoes. For the critical score, we have a 21% rotten approval rating from 119 reviews. The summary reads: The Smurfs assembles an undeniably talented cast of voice actors and live-action stars, then crushes them beneath a blue mound of lowest common denominator kiddie fare. Ouch, that's not looking good, hey? That being said, let's not forget that sometimes on this channel, we have realized that critics are a bit out of touch and they don't really get what the film's trying to achieve, hence why there can be a divide between the critic and the audience. I don't think that's going to be the case here today. This film has a 43% rotten score from the wider audience too. That is pretty damning. In the end, there was nothing else for it but to fire up Netflix and give it a watch to see what I think. And so, in summary, this movie is deeply underrated and awesome in so many ways. Said nobody ever, this movie sucks. It really just sucks. There is very little in this film that I would argue is good. Very little. Sometimes you can sit down and watch these sorts of movies and just enjoy it for what it is. It may be goofy. You can have silly toilet humor or childish jokes, but you can still engage with it. Understand what it's trying to do. I could not engage with this movie in almost any respect. I suppose we'd better jump into that now. When I break down a film, I usually like to separate things into three major categories. We need to look at the visuals, the audio side of things, and then the story. We'll start with the visuals. Smurfs up first. I will admit, before jumping into the film, I assumed that this was going to be a fully animated movie. Instead, we've been treated to a hybrid movie, where human actors interact with the little animated characters in the vein of Stuart Little, or Alvin and the Chipmunks. The actual animation for the Smurfs was fine. It did look a little bit dated at times, but it's almost 15 years old. Those things happen as things age and technology improves. We start to get used to the newer looks, and the older stuff starts to look cheap. It's like the Star Wars prequels. Anyway, the animation for the Smurfs is solid, except where they're interacting with the humans. When they look like they're hugging Neil Patrick Harris or getting scooped up into people's hands, it just doesn't look right. They feel superimposed in, like they're not actually in the scene. It felt far more fake compared to things like Stuart Little or Alvin, which are both far older movies. On top of that, we had the cat, who was largely CGI and looked terrible. It was distractingly awful when they'd give him facial expressions and whatnot. They should have just exclusively used a cat without bothering with the bad CGI. Beyond this, whilst the actual quality of the animation's fine, the design of the Smurfs, probably not so much. This obviously partially comes down to their original classic designs, but they could have just taken more creative license to differentiate some of these characters. Papa Smurf wears red, he has a beard. That is good. It's smart design, it's very clear, obvious character. You can tell who he is at a distance or during action sequences. Smurfette, again, is obviously the girl, the only girl in the entire Smurf village. She has long blonde hair to go along with that. Thus, it becomes very clear who she is, and it's easy to identify her. Gutsy Smurf is Scottish for some reason, but it's a good thing he is, because he's clad in a kilt with a pom-pom on his hat that makes it obvious who he is and what he's doing. So we've got three obvious and easy to identify Smurfs. But the other three main Smurfs in this movie, not so much. Brainy Smurf, Grouchy Smurf, and Clumsy Smurf. They all look the same. They all wear the same white pants. They have the same white hat. Yes, Brainy has glasses, but at a distance or during action they're hard to see, and so it all gets muddled. I just feel like it wasn't a good design choice at all. If you can randomly invent a special Scottish Smurf, you could change up the others a bit too. I mean, in the village itself, you see a bunch of unique looking Smurfs that look different from the rest. In the end though, they hardly use them, except for at the start of the movie and the end. So it's a waste. I have another problem as well, but this is just personal taste. Why do the Smurfs have those gross little stub tails that poke out the back of their pants? I do not care if it's accurate to their OG designs. Looks disgusting. Beyond just the CGI though, visually the film felt too clean, too sterile. Like it was cooked up in a lab by executives and analysts based on metric and analytics without any sort of creative soul. It feels lifeless in that way, which really served to drag down any of my enjoyment of the film. It's like eating plain toast with no spread on it. Yes, it's technically food, but what is there to enjoy? It's the same issue with the soundtrack. It feels deeply generic. I forgot what any of the themes sounded like before I went back and listened to them one more time. Once again, they're some of the most bland and basic themes imaginable. On top of that, surely if you're going to cast Katy Perry as Smurfette, you'll get your money's worth by having her sing a few original songs for your movie. No? It felt like a missed opportunity to liven things up across the film. Of course, they somehow find time for a Smurf sing-along and rap, bad rap that is, that doesn't have Katy Perry or Neil Patrick Harris singing at all in it, just the other random Smurfs. It would be funny if it wasn't so sad and cringe. On the plus side for the audio side of things though, was that the voice acting for the Smurfs was actually very good. I don't think there were any dud performances, and the live action performances were good too. Even if I felt sorry for Hank Azaria, who was playing the role of the main villain. He rarely had scenes with actual people, he had a weird script and costume, and yet was able to pull it off to make a performance that, at least it made you laugh sometimes. Apparently he had to spend 130 hours total in the makeup chair to become this character. Doing that for a movie like this? Man, you'd hope they were paying him well. As we can see, the first two categories are a bust, but they can still pull it back with a really dynamic, witty, and enjoyable script. They don't, but they could have. The Smurf movie begins in a little village in a magical realm where the Smurfs are getting ready for the Festival of the Blue Moon, which is an important day on the Smurf calendar. Everything seems to be going swimmingly, and all the Smurfs are doing their job. But Papa Smurf gets a bad premonition. He sees a vision of Clumsy Smurf reaching for a dragon wand, and then the Smurfs being captured by Gargamel, an evil wizard and nemesis of the Smurfs. Since Clumsy is reckless and stupid and, in all honesty, useless in every way, even when every single Smurf in the village begs him to stay at home and just relax to stay out of the way and ensure nothing goes wrong, he decides to leave the village and go forage for Smurf fruit. Yes, Smurf fruit. This film is filled with terrible Smurf puns and gags. Here is where he's spotted by Gargamel and his cat familiar, Azrael, who chase him with Clumsy leading them directly to the hidden Smurf village. Doesn't even try to lead them somewhere else. They begin to trash the place to try to capture the Smurfs, only for Papa to fight back and stall them long enough for the Smurfs to evacuate and escape. Of course, since Clumsy is an idiot, he doesn't go with the rest of them down the safe path, but follows the deadly path towards the aptly named Forbidden Falls. A few of the other Smurfs try to rescue him, only for a portal to New York City to open up and suck them in, alongside Gargamel and Azrael. After a brief chase, the Smurfs end up in the apartment of Patrick and Grace Winslow, two expecting parents who take them in after they explain their story. Misunderstanding the concept of advertising in a marketing campaign, the Smurfs come to the conclusion that Patrick must be a fortune teller, and so they follow him to work, where they come across Gargamel, because of course they do. He's also there for some reason. Gargamel chases them into a toy store and uses a stolen leaf blower to try to capture them. They're in turn rescued by Patrick, and Gargamel is arrested and sent straight to prison, which seems a bit harsh for stealing a leaf blower, but it is what it is. He does end up escaping with a swarm of flies carrying him though, which surely would have made the news in this world. Huge manhunt for someone like that. Papa Smurf figures out what night they can return home, and so the main Smurfs, except for Clumsy because they've learned their lesson about what he's like, set out to try to find a spell book which will give them the ability to turn the moon blue. Very conveniently, they find this exact book in an antique store. Gargamel bursts in and finds the wand from the vision Papa had at the start of the movie, then Papa sacrifices himself to ensure the others can escape. Back at the apartment, Patrick and the Smurfs decide that they need to save Papa Smurf before Gargamel can harvest his essence. They use the spell to open a portal back to their world, and they bring through the entire Smurf family to ambush him. A battle ensues, and the vision almost comes to pass, with Clumsy dropping the wand and Gargamel capturing all the Smurfs. But in the end, Clumsy actually gets his moment. He catches the wand instead and blasts Gargamel into a pile of garbage. The Smurfs all celebrate and embrace Patrick and Grace as they return to their own magical realm for good. The end. Good riddance. Oh, and in the epilogue/credits montage, we see that Grace and Patrick have a baby boy whom they named Blue. Yes, Blue. Whilst the Smurfs rebuild their village to look like New York City. The story and the script suck. It's just bad. The dialogue's stilted. It's filled with so many cringy puns and Smurf references. I mean, seriously, words are frequently replaced inexplicably with the word Smurf, even if it doesn't make any sense. The jokes themselves are not very funny for the most part, and the characters are bland and two-dimensional. Worst of all, though, that the film's just boring. The plot is boring. The story's boring. It's very by the numbers, very basic. Not every film's going to break new ground or feel different. But if you're going to go with the safe choice story, you need to hit it out of the park. This film hits nothing out of the park. It does anything but strike out. And so I'm really not surprised that it received such a poor critical reception. I was bored to tears. One of the most tedious films I've ever seen. Sadly, I still feel the need to keep picking at this scab and dive deeper into Smurfs content, so I'll be back watching the sequel at some point. Can it get worse than this? Maybe they'll improve the formula, we'll see. And so with all that being said, these have been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. Have you watched the Smurfs movie before? If so, did you think it was any good? Or like me, do you think it's absolute bottom rung garbage? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.